I'm Jackson. Welcome to Edible Garden Growers. On this episode, we're going to be talking about how I transplant my pepper seedlings. So I've got a 72 cell tray of peppers here. They were started about a month ago. Some of them are getting their third and fourth sets of true leaves at this point. I tend to not transplant any sooner than that. You want at least two, but what you're really looking for is that the root system is filled out the cells. So I use 72 cell trays. This is about the size the peppers want to get before they start to get root bound. They're not root bound yet, but can become so if they stay in here much longer than this. If you're using like a 200 cell tray, you're going to have to transplant them a lot sooner because they'll fill that out. If you're using a 50 cell tray, you can let them get quite a bit bigger. But for the 72 cell, this is the pretty ideal size for transplanting. And so I'm going to walk you through how I do that. So when it comes to transplanting peppers, my preferred method of transplanting is using a fork. Real simple, straightforward. You want to make sure if you're going this route, that it's flat on the backside, not curved. It's going to make it more of a challenge to get the seedlings out of there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take it, go right along the sidewall, trying to stay as close to it as you can and not going into the soil. Once you get down to the bottom, you're going to tilt it back and slowly pop it out. So as you can see, hopefully, that is staying in one piece. It's not root bound at this point, but it's got enough of a root structure that it's keeping its shape. So that's a pretty prime time to transplant. If it gets too root bound, it's going to be struggling when it gets into the next pot, and if you don't let it develop enough, it's going to fall apart and then be a little stressed out during the transplanting process. So this is a pretty prime time to transplant. So the size of the pot that you're going to be up potting into is really dependent on your preferences, your growing situation, your environment. There's too many factors to tell you what size you should use. Common sizes are 2.5 to 4 inch, 3.5 inch, 1 gallon. It really just comes down to your preference. My preference is using these 2.5 inch pots for a lot of the stuff that I do. I also use slightly bigger size pots, just depending on the scenario. But considering I run a nursery and I like to maximize the space I have and sell my plants before they get too big, I like to use these 2.5 inchers. So you want to get your soil in there, make a little bit of a hole. You don't want to compact the soil too much, but just enough to create that little bit of a gap. And I like to use a little bit of kelp meal. It helps with the transplant shock, especially if the root system's not fully intact and it starts falling apart. You don't need a whole lot, just a light little dusting. I buy this stuff by the 50-pound bag, but you can find it in like little boxes for fairly affordable. So got the kelp meal in there. About to pull one of these guys out of the tray. And so not a perfect one, but pretty intact for the most part. Slightly smaller one than some of the rest. Stick that guy in there like so. I kind of tap the sides of the pots just to make sure that soil and the kelp meal works its way up against the roots. You don't want to compact it. A lot of people I see want to like push the soil down. That's going to make it hard for the water to get in there. Let the water do the compaction for you. And then just a little bit of a backfilling. Earlier I mentioned I like to add a little bit of powdered kelp meal into my pots when I'm transplanting. The plants aren't going to be able to uptake that right away, so I also like to use it in a liquid form. So this is from GS Plant Foods. You can find this stuff on Amazon if you're not wanting to go to a garden center and look for something, or maybe you're near it's pretty limited in their options. It's organic, which I'm a fan of. Then I also am going to be using a little bit of this organic liquid fish. So this is a hydrolysit, so this has got all the good stuff in it. Something you might be a little more familiar with is the Alaskan fish fertilizer. This is going to be a 511. This guy is 231, so quite a bit different. This is an emulsion, so this is kind of bottom of the barrel stuff. It works if it's all you can afford or what you can find. It definitely isn't bad. I wouldn't use it throughout the plant's entire life cycle, but at least to give it a bit of a boost during that transplanting time, it's got no problems using it. But really, I'd recommend going after some hydrolysit. It's definitely gonna be more up your alley for what you're looking for in terms of performance. The liquid kelp is 0.3, 0.6, so it doesn't really have much in the way of its macronutrients, but it's going to help with that transplant shock, definitely. So yeah, let's get to mixing this stuff up. Alright, so I'm going to be using my homemade Vortex tea brewer to be mixing up my nutrients. It's just easier in my opinion than a bucket. It's also a 10-gallon container, and I don't have any 10-gallon containers, and I want to fill this all the way up. So you'll get to see how this guy works in action. Pretty fun. I've got another video coming out on how I built this and what I use it for, but for now we're just going to be using it to mix some liquid nutrients. And so this guy, the liquid fish, recommends 2 to 4 ounces per gallon. I'm just going to do 1 ounce because these guys are still pretty small. I'm wanting to dilute it. This guy recommends for the kelp 1 ounce to 1 gallon, so I'm going to be doing ½ ounce on those. So I'll be doing, so I'll be doing 5 ounces of the fish and 2½ ounces of the liquid kelp for this 10-gallon container. Alright, so it's pretty loud in here because my pumps are kind of noisy, that thing's kind of noisy, so hopefully you can hear me clearly. As you can see, it's doing a little vortex there. Water swirls in a circle, goes down the bottom, goes out a little port that then brings the water back up these little side chutes. So air is being pumped down this guy, down into here, and then up, so it acts as an airlift that pulls the water up with it, and it's just a continual circulating motion. So this way you don't need to worry about your mix separating and all the sediment and stuff collecting at the bottom. Just ensure that it's just constantly agitated, and so you're going to have an even mixture throughout. So the pH is going to be sitting kind of low, and I'm going to add some pH up to get that all situated. Alright, so I'm out here in the shorter of the 2 polytunnels I got. This is my 20-footer. It's only about not even 5 feet tall, so I can't stand up quite in it. This row that I'm planting right here is going to be the Ahi lemon drops, these guys. So this is getting to a pretty ideal time to transplant. You could definitely let it go longer in the size of a pot, but this is a pretty good size for me. The way I transplant to do minimal disturbance of the root system is you're going to take your pot. I like to do that, put the stem in between my fingers, so I'm holding everything in place, tip it upside down, and then all it's going to take is a small push. It doesn't really take a whole lot of effort. Sometimes they get stuck, but usually the pot should come right off. As you can see, that is a pretty healthy root system. It's not fully encompassing, but the fact that it's not falling apart is a pretty good sign. I mean, mildly. These guys could definitely go a little bit longer, but I'm needing to clear out some space in the greenhouse, so this is a pretty ideal transplant time for these guys. So this is a 30-inch wide bed by 20 feet long. So I like to do 2 rows within the bed when I do the peppers, so I'll do them 18 inches apart, the 2 rows, and then within the rows they'll be 12 to 18 inches apart depending on the variety. The ones that tend to bush out more, I'll do 18 inches. The ones that don't quite as much, I'll do 12 inches between, and that should give a pretty healthy, thick canopy, but not too dense. If you've got a long season and you're starting real early, 12 inches might be a little too close. I've got a shorter season, and now that I'm using this polytunnel, I'm extending my season, so 18 inches might be a little, 12 inches might be a little too close, but we're just gonna see what happens. I'm gonna do 18 for most of them. My jalapenos, I'm going to be doing 12 inches because those guys just seem to grow more vertically rather than bushy for me. So yeah, I like to dig a hole deep enough to at least get to where the cotyledons are. It's, as long as you're burying the root ball, you can go up as far as you want. You don't want to go too far. A lot of people like to go up to the first set of true leaves. I just like to get at least an inch or so above the root ball. I'm going to dig out the hole. I'm going to fill it with a little bit of feather meal, a little bit of kelp meal, and yeah, so let's get to it.
For another time.
So once you got everything planted, you want to make sure you water things in. Some people might say it's not necessarily necessary. I think it's pretty important, especially if you end up getting hit with a dry spell and plant wasn't able to properly make contact with all the soil around it. Soil can dry out and you get yourself a dead plant. So definitely make sure you water stuff in. I'm going to be using my soaker hoses, or not soaker hoses, the drip tape here to take care of that for me. So that's basically the gist of how I transplant, both into 2.5-inch pots or any size pot, and then later into the ground a few weeks after that. Hopefully this video provided some use for you. I love growing peppers. I want to see people grow peppers and do well with them. It's not very encouraging when you plant them and you only get 1 or 2 tiny little peppers, so I want to pass on as much information as I can to make it more of an enjoyable experience for all you guys. So thanks for watching.